Hello. Today we talk with Jordan Leigh around the zeitgeist surrounding kind of Devcon3, the differences for how crazy different things were just a year ago at Devcon2, and we even cover some tips for asking questions at the conference. So enjoy and hope to see you at Devcon3. Hello, everyone. My name is Reese Lindmark, and you're listening to another episode of Creating a Humanist Blockchain Future. And in this podcast, we take a systems thinking approach to doing good in the world. And so we have a couple different series that focus on different system scopes. And today's series is Series C on software systems, where we dive into code and ask the question, how are the machine systems structured? And today, I'm excited to talk with Jordan Leigh about Devcon3. And Jordan is a software engineer at ConsenSys, who also does these really, really clear Ethereum educational videos through his web channel, Decypher Media. Jordan, welcome and thanks for being on the show.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, Reese.
Yeah, so I was just excited to do this podcast because, kind of think about Devcon3 as like a primer and, something that someone could listen to on the plane to get excited, to kind of get ready for Devcon3, and especially for someone like me who hasn't really been to Devcon before, and I think for a lot of people in the ecosystem these days, given 2017 and the rise of the ICO and what have you, I think there's going to be a lot of new people coming into the atmosphere here. So let's kind of start at a high level. And Jordan, could you kind of give us the context of like where is Ethereum at right now, especially kind of leading into Devcon 3?
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best.
Yeah, there's a lot of context.
If we rewind a year ago, I guess, Devcon2 in Shanghai, China, the price of Ether was around $10, I think. And as far as I know, like Augur was probably the only company that had done an ICO at the time, and they had raised a couple $1 million, I think $5 million or something like that. And if you fast forward to now, going into Devcon 3, the price of Ether is $300, and there's been, multiple billions of dollars raised in ICO projects. So the order of magnitude at which the Ethereum project is at, not only in terms of the money involved, but just the kind of like zeitgeist impact of it, is just an order of magnitude higher. So, I mean, I'm going to be really interested in kind of how that dichotomy manifests itself at the actual tech conference, because Devcon is a tech conference. It's a conference about technology. And there's kind of two competing forces in Ethereum right now. There's the underlying technology, which is a bunch of nerds building computer software. And then there's this kind of like marketing wing that's evangelizing the technology and the social impact it will make, and getting normal people excited about it, and people hearing about, these crazy numbers and ICOs, and how those things will kind of manifest itself at a tech conference is going to be really interesting to see. So I'm just curious to like get the kind of high level vibe of the conference.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right to say that the order of magnitude, as you said, and for me, not being around in 2016, it was like, wow, like only, $5 million through Augur, the price of Ether is $10, and yeah, billions of dollars in here. The zeitgeist, as you said, is totally different. And what you're saying around the conference, I think is interesting because, I went to ConsenSys, the one put on my CoinDesk earlier this year in May, and that had a similar vibe where you had the like crypto anarchist, Bitcoin maximalist people, and then the banks kind of coming in. And like you have a similar kind of two-edged system here, but with an Ethereum where you have the developers and the developer conference, and then kind of the social impact kind of marketing people. So I do think that that'll be interesting. How do you see, thinking more about the difference between Devcon 2 and Devcon 3? What do you see as kind of in terms of either the talks themselves that are happening, or kind of other ways that it's kind of similar or different this year compared to last year?
Well, Devcon 2, I think people thought it was exciting that a lot of things got announced. People were talking about their projects and what they were working on, and it seemed like all this cool momentum was happening in the space. And now it's a year later, and I'm really curious to see what progress has actually been made on those kind of promises that were laid out a year ago. And that I think is going to be really interesting because there's been so much money and so many people getting really rich over the last year, like, is the development momentum actually keeping up, or is it just gotten completely derailed by all this hysteria and money being thrown around? And I think it'll be somewhat like if you compare the delta of what people were talking about last year to what they're talking about now, if it's not very pronounced, I think that would be a reason for concern. So, I mean, I'm really looking for progress in a lot of the projects, and we'll see.
Yeah, and by projects, are you talking about specific things that the Ethereum Foundation is doing? Or are you talking about the like more DApp, general DApp ecosystem?
Well, yeah, I would think the entire ecosystem, I guess, to an extent. It's kind of hard though because a lot of the dApps are a little early for what they're promising because there's just so many core kind of infrastructural components missing from Ethereum or underdeveloped from Ethereum. So it's really hard to make these large scale applications that everyone's been promising. So I think what's really important is to see the progress on these low level infrastructure projects so that you can assess if what people are promising at the application level are even possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And a lot of this reminds me of a recent post by Albert Wenger around Ethereum and Bitcoin. And for him, he's like, hey, the bull case for Ethereum is if in the next year we have some actual Ethereum projects that launch and get, traction, and if progress is made on Ethereum scaling. It's kind of this combination of like, if we are doing scaling and some of these projects launch, then that would be really, really powerful. We haven't talked too much about that scaling piece right now. I feel like that's the thing that's on everybody's mind with Plasma and Raiden and things like that, and Casper, obviously. How do you think about where Ethereum's at with scaling these days?
So obviously scaling is kind of the big thing that will decide whether or not Ethereum ultimately succeeds or fails. So it's obviously really important, but I don't think it's as imminent a concern as a lot of people make it out to be. I mean, Ethereum right now, you could run a 10 terabyte hard drive, which you could buy for maybe a couple $100, if that. And you could run the Ethereum blockchain with its current network statistics for the next 5 years, pretty easily. So I think just adding more hardware to scale Ethereum nodes for a short-term solution is pretty viable.
Yep.
So I don't think that needing to come up with some sort of innovative scaling solution is something that's like a pressing concern. But yeah, obviously it can't continue its current network growth without any software scaling solution. It's obviously going to need some major software scaling solution. And I think that the best people at the Ethereum Foundation are currently working on that now.
Yep. And
this has been being worked on since the inception of Ethereum. I mean, Ethereum was originally envisioned to have a proof of stake consensus mechanism. And that was conceived at the very beginning. So this is a multi-year project in the works. So yeah, the Casper protocol has had a lot of work on it over the past year. Haven't been following it super closely, but I think that'll be very interesting to see what gets talked about at Devcon.
Yeah.
Or what gets kind of announced in terms of timelines for implementation.
I think that's interesting because, there's so many, in Devcon, I mean, talking about the hype around Devcon, I know not most, but a lot of the people that I know are going to Devcon even without tickets, just to go there and network and just talk with people. And everybody's planning on all these announcements at Devcon. And I think that one thing that I didn't think about is like, those announcements hold true for the ecosystem, but they also hold true for the Ethereum Foundation itself, where they say, hey, here's a big update on Casper or whatever. I think that, like you're saying, we'll both see some of those big updates and then see what those commitments look like. So kind of transitioning over a bit here, I feel like we've gotten a good idea for where we're at with respect to Devcon3. How do you think, so thinking about, the tech conference itself, there's one side of it which is going to the talks and trying to listen to the coding and things of that variety. And we're going to dive into that later. How are you thinking also just about things that you're excited to talk with people about at the bar or, at Cancun, so on the beach? What are some things that are on your mind where you're like, I'd really love to ask these people these questions?
Well, all right. I would say there's kind of like two parts to how I would think about that. One is the things like the actual specific protocol level stuff that I'm fascinated by, that I'm just curious to learn what kind of work is being done on it. So two examples of that, I guess, would be Swarm, which is the decentralized file storage network that is being worked on by the Ethereum Foundation. And this is obviously an integral part of most decentralized applications, is that they need some sort of file storage system. And yeah, the Swarm project has been somewhat mysterious. They've kind of been clandestine with what they've been doing. So I'd be very curious to learn more and more about how that work has been going and what the big problems that they're running into. And I think that'll probably be a pretty large component of Devcon, at least with some of the talks and with some of the people working on it. So that's definitely one of them. I'm also curious
wait, so
about.
pause for a second
go
on
ahead, sorry.
on Swarm. Yeah, so that's the and Swarm is the decentralized file storage, which is similar to the like IPFS and Filecoin. Is there something about Swarm that excites you more than or I guess how is Swarm different than IPFS and or Filecoin?
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns about Filecoin with the way that they raised money. I think that only raising from accredited investors was a massive mistake. I think it just is. I don't know why they chose to go that route. I think it really burned a lot of bridges. And I think that it's going to probably haunt them down the road, because I could see Filecoin not holding true to some of the core values that make a decentralized file storage system, exciting. And that includes things like censorship resistance, open source code bases. I mean, I don't know if they're going to compromise on those kind of things, but I think it's a lot more likely that they would with the current way that they chose to raise money than with Swarm, which is, to my knowledge right now, been completely transparent and open source about everything that they're doing. So.
Got it. Yeah, so Swarm is the specific Ethereum Foundation version of one of these decentralized storage networks. So what's the other one that you're excited about in this kind of part of this Ethereum kind of base layer protocol?
Yeah, I'm very interested in Whisper, which is the peer-to-peer messaging code that lives on like Ethereum nodes. Like, so if you're running an Ethereum node, you'll have access to this protocol called Whisper, which allows you to send messages to other Ethereum nodes that are somewhat like ephemeral. Like, you just transmit like arbitrary text messages to them, and then they can route them to other nodes, but not necessarily store them permanently. But that would allow, if you can think of the UX down the road, something like MetaMask, which is a Chrome extension that has an Ethereum wallet, could then just pick up the message when it's broadcast and store it. And then you could have a little badge on your MetaMask account for a new message from a specific address. And that solves a really big problem now of when you're using Ethereum addresses for identity, that you don't have any way to get in contact with that Ethereum address because it's just a hex string. You don't actually know any contact info about it. But if you can send messages directly to Ethereum addresses, that's just another core thing that really needs to exist for a lot of decentralized applications to work properly. And I think that, that is something that has been being worked on, but I'm not really sure what the status is, because again, it's kind of mysterious also. So yeah, I'm curious to just get updates on these kind of core level protocols that really need to be at a certain level of usability for a lot of the decentralized applications to actually be able to fulfill their promises.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think and these are some of the very initial ones. And you were talking, before we went live, around how you actually personally want to use Whisper. You want to be able to communicate with specific, Ethereum addresses, and you have no way to do so right now. And so I think that, like you're saying, for these things to really exist and be part of this ecosystem is crucial for even someone who's just a little bit closer to mainstream adoption here. Do you know why, by the way, they are both for Swarm and Whisper? It's like how is there a clear way to know their progress, or you said the word clandestine twice with respect to them?
No, I think it's not that they're clandestine. It's that all the work, like, you have to follow it actively. You can't passively follow it. Like, if you're not hanging out in the Discord channels or whatever they're using now, Riot IM, but if you're not in those channels, like, actively following it, you're not going to get any information about it. It's not like you could just go watch a video about Whisper's progress. Like, it's like you have to make this really active effort to follow it.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's like not everyone is going to be doing that. So there's a lot of people that just don't get updates on the status of these projects.
Yeah, that makes sense. And a little bit more on some of the other side here is we have, talking about, we talked a little bit about scaling and Casper and proof of stake, and there's also all the ZK Snarks stuff happening. What for you makes you more interested by some of the Swarm and Whisper things as compared to some of the the other things like ZK Snarks?
Oh, I'm super interested in ZK Snarks.
Nice, nice.
I'm fascinated by it. Um, I guess it's just more like I'm not. It's not like immediately applicable to me as a software developer
Mm,
in the sense that it's like a paradigm shift almost. Like when you're talking about like zero knowledge transactions, like that's like a complete paradigm shift in the way that you're even thinking about your
mm,
application.
mm.
And I'm not at like I'm not that level of software developer where I'm thinking about paradigm shifting applications. I'm just thinking about how to leverage existing things in Ethereum for like use cases that I'm interested in.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, like I'm very interested in ZK Snarks. The like math behind it, I think, is really interesting, and I think like doing token contracts because I believe even with just the Byzantium update, you can do token contracts with um, like hidden balances. So you can have
Wow.
ERC20 tokens where people don't know the actual account balances, but you can verify that there's only a fixed amount of tokens. So like I think there's probably like interesting things that can come out of that, but yeah, I'm super interested in it. I'm just not very optimistic that anyone's going to get on stage and explain it clearly because that is, I'm pretty sure, I don't think anyone's explained ZK Snarks clearly anywhere on the internet yet. So,
Nice. Maybe you will at some other point in the future. Let us know when
definitely.
that goes live. Yeah. Um,
But yeah, I'm interested to talk to people about it for sure.
yeah, cool. So thinking more, let's say you're pretending you're at Devcon 3, you went in, you listened to some talks about Swarm, you listened to some talks about Whisper, now you're at the bar, you're standing next to some people. What kind of questions are you going to be asking them? What kind of things are you going to be interested to learn from the other people who are there?
Well, one of the cool things about a conference like DevCon is that you're gonna learn so much that you didn't even know about. So it's like you're gonna learn things that you wouldn't have even known to ask because you didn't even know they existed, or you didn't realize that they were as important as they were. And that's the cool thing about conferences like this, like going in person, is that like you don't know what you don't know, but you'll learn by being around so many smart people that are interested in the same space. So it's kind of like what manifests itself to you is the interesting thing. It's not
Interesting.
necessarily like you grilling someone else.
Yep, 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 yep. So I agree with that, and I think that that is a fascinating part of this. Was there something, by the way, for you last year at Devcon 2 in Shanghai where you like went there and you're like, whoa, now, what was like a moment for you like that at Devcon 2?
There was so much like that. Like to me, DevCon 2 is just this complete, arena of mystery and wonder. Like it was literally like walking into a movie or something. Like it just didn't feel like the real world. Um, but I was just amazed by just the random encounters you would have with people that are talking about like working on the Solidity compiler and what challenges they were having. And it's just like you just felt like so engrossed in this like bizarre ecosystem that was being created. And people were just so optimistic and so like steadfast in their belief that Ethereum would be big.
Wow.
And yeah, it was super compelling to like hear all the different ideas people had. They weren't necessarily like projects, but they were like ideas about what could manifest itself. And yeah, it's been interested to see to an extent it kind of manifests itself over the last year in that like Ethereum has gotten just absolute mainstream recognition.
Yep.
But the format that it's gotten mainstream recognition is in with like these like ICOs,
Yep.
which are not necessarily like they feel a little like a boiler roomy. It's like people trading penny stocks more so than like actually building out like important applications for the future.
Yep.
So again, it's like this interesting dichotomy that you have to hold in your head of this really large ambition for using something like Ethereum to really improve core underpinnings of our existence in the world, and then like this reality that the reason Ethereum is popular is because people are trading penny stocks and trying to scam each other.
Yep.
And and then it's like, to what extent is that going to manifest itself? Like, is one side going to have too much momentum, or is one side going to be able to fight back, or is this just like growing pains for a new paradigm?
Yep.
I don't know. And like being able to look at all those forces, like I don't think there's a better way to get a gauge on the ecosystem and how strong each of those forces are and how much momentum they have than like going to a conference like DevCon and just talking to like everyone you can.
Yep.
Like that's the only way to really wrap your head around something so complex. So
Yeah, that's
it's
interesting.
just it's gonna be really, yeah.
I feel like there's a yeah, it's that the difference between the two is crazy, and I feel like there's another piece here which I was personally interested by, which was from Devcon 1 and kind of Devcon 2. I've seen some talks, and I was just watching this talk by Vinay Gupta around the ability for Ethereum to build these metastructures, which allow for the people to make a new ecosystem while paying back the ecosystem itself. And it was a very, very powerful talk. And something that I was interested by was that at Devcon3, it seemed like almost all the talks were more at the at both either the code level or the kind of implementation level, but it doesn't necessarily seem like there's a big like Vinay Gupta style, we're building the decentralized future kind of talk here. And that's maybe because we already have enough hype and like we need to get to work, or like, I mean, talks like that happened at Devcon 2 and just feels like they might not be happening as much here at Devcon 3.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I think I can't speak to how the talks are organized because I have no idea like who organized them or why, but I could see that being the case, that whoever put this conference together was really thinking like we have enough of that. We really need to talk about the tech, or we're not going to be able to like realize that vision.
Yeah, that makes sense. So kind of thinking a little bit more about this, I have a couple final thoughts on top of my mind. The first is back to this question, because I do want to push on it, because I agree with you that just being there, being in the context, being in the ether, and getting information through osmosis and spontaneity is the real power of these conferences. Are there things, though, that you specifically are like, oh, man, I would love to chat about these kinds of things? Are there stuff that comes to the top of your mind for that?
Well, I'm interested. Like, I feel like if you get to talk to the, like lead developer, or hold on one sec, or the, like product visionary of any project, it's going to be interesting. It's not like I'm interested in a lot of things that are going on in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm not sure necessarily which one stands out in my head more than anything, but yeah, it's cool. I mean, like I remember at Devcon 2, like when we were having brunch and just Vitalik came and like sat down next to us, and we got to just hang out with Vitalik, talking to him about random things. Yep. And watch him speak Mandarin in China, which was crazy. It's like, oh my God, this guy speaks Mandarin. And yeah, it's like that kind of stuff is just really cool. So it's not like anything specific that I have in my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that as a heuristic though is true, which is like, hey, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you passionate about this stuff? And what are you building? And then they'll be able to say, well, I'm building blah, blah, blah. And then they'll just be able to dive into their project, which is likely to be interesting. So just kind of pulling that enthusiasm out of people.
Yeah, and you'll probably get to talk to people, especially if you're new to the space. You'll get to talk to people who have been in the space for a really long time. And that's also really interesting to me.
Yeah,
it's like listening to people talk about being in Bitcoin in 2011 and all the stuff that went down.
Yes, exactly.
And like just getting like better like grounding for the context at which Ethereum is evolving at, I think is really important too. And that's kind of hard to do otherwise.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, because you can't go. Yeah, for me, it's tough to know what things were like a year ago. But talking with people who were there in 2015, early 2015, is they've kind of they've been jaded. No.
Yeah. It's crazy to think, because I remember in Shanghai when the price of Ethereum was $10. I remember thinking it's crazy how rich people have gotten, because Ethereum ICO'd at like 40 cents. So people had already like 20x at the time. Like anyone that was in the pre-sale had already 20x at $10. So now at $300, I mean, like we're just in a different realm. Like we're at like 500x here. Yep. So yep. I already thought it was excessive. So I have just no idea how, like, what this is going to be like.
Yep.
Like we're at just orders of magnitude that are just completely ridiculous.
Yep.
So
So thinking maybe the final question here that I have is, thinking about, so people are going here, they're at Devcon3, they're part of the context of both scaling and these new protocols and all the different projects that are happening, just talking with interesting people, asking them what they're excited about. Now thinking though about, back to this piece that you had about progress, thinking about Devcon4, whenever that, a year from now, what are the things that you would really like to see to make sure, okay, it's Devcon3, we're going to Devcon3, by Devcon4, what would you be hoping and expecting to see by then?
Well, I think by Devcon4, you have to have mainstream applications. I mean, I don't think there is really a single mainstream application on Ethereum right now that isn't trading. I think that's pretty much it. And I think that that's kind of okay because, again, we're trying to build a protocol to let applications exist, but the protocol does not have all the pieces together. But if by Devcon4 you don't have, mainstream application use, I think it would be really concerning.
Yep, that makes sense. So we're looking for application use. If you are an application developer, develop those applications. Are there any final? There we go.
A lot of it. So I actually have a pet theory that there's an EIP. So I think it's EIP 86. Mm-hmm. Don't quote me on the number though, but it's going to be part of the Constantinople fork mm-hmm. that Ethereum does. And I actually think that this is the missing piece to a lot of application use. Mm. So EIP 86 will let you essentially pay the gas cost for a transaction from a contract. So it doesn't need to be paid for by the initiating account. Mm. And what that'll let you do is have somebody that has never used Ethereum before create a wallet and interact with a smart contract without needing to go to Coinbase and register and buy Ether and then use that to pay the gas cost. So it'll let them just interact with a contract in one step. And
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That to have a more frictionless environment there.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just there's things like that I really think are almost prerequisites to getting all these people are out promising the world in terms of decentralized applications, and they very, very well may be right also. But the question is these are basic things that probably need to get added to Ethereum in order to make that happen. And just again, I feel like you just need to. I'm interested in getting a sense of how close those things are to happening. Mm-hmm. And it might be way closer than I realize. It may be, you talk to people and it's oh, wow, all this is going to happen in the next couple of months. This is going down. Mm-hmm. Or it might be oh man, the cart is really far ahead of the horse.
Yeah. Really hope one of these things is live by Devcon4.
Yeah. So again, it's just exciting too. When you ask me what I'm really interested in, it's kind of parsing the entire experience there and being able to update my mental model of this is where we're really at and this is what I can expect over the next year.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we should pretty much conclude on that there's by going to something like Devcon, you get to update your mental model based off of how far along Ethereum and this new decentralized future that we're all here to build and are so excited by, where are we actually at and where and what does it look like in terms of the progress we've made over the past year or so. Any final thoughts or feelings from you here on this, Jordan?
Final thoughts is I think it's going to be an exhausting 4 days. There's a lot of content, and I think it's going to be really dense and technical, and it's going to be really interesting. And I think Ethereum is in a very interesting place because, again, it's it's super interesting technology. And it's super undetermined whether or not it will succeed, which adds another layer of interest to it. Because it's oh, the new iPhone, we know people are going to buy it and it's going to be successful. It's there's not mystery around it the way there is with Ethereum, where it's this could either be the operating system for humanity or it could be a complete Hindenburg just blow up. Yeah. We have no idea. And that makes it so exciting. That's part of the narrative that drives a lot of mainstream attention from people that aren't even in software development. But I think it's such an interesting place. But no matter what, you just can't ignore it. It's too interesting of a project. So I hope people pay attention to what's going on, because no matter what the outcome is, like, this is just super interesting stuff.
Yep.
Everyone
Yep.
should. Yeah.
Pay attention. Pay attention to us. I know. I agree with you, and I think that I think Devcon3 will be the first a big check mark in everybody's mind around. Okay, where are we at with respect to these things? So with that, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you want to go and check out, I mean, really, if you're a developer who's interested in learning more about Ethereum, definitely check out Jordan's videos at Decypher Media. They are really, really high quality and very condensed and have nice visuals. So check that out. And also, if you're at Devcon, say hi to me or say hi to Jordan as we're listening to talks or on the beach or whatever. Jordan, thanks so much for being here.
Reese. Yeah, thanks, Reese. I appreciate it.
Sweet. And goodbye, everybody. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you have any feedback, please tweet at me at Reese Lindmark. That's RHYSLINDMARK at Reese Lindmark on Twitter. If you have any feedback, that'd be awesome. Or if you want to sign up for the newsletter, follow me on Twitter or support me on Patreon. I have about 25 patrons supporting me, and it's how I make my money. So you can support me at patreon.com/RHYSLINDMARK. Thanks so much, and bye.